Hello and welcome to Knights at the Game Table. Tonight we are going to be playing some modern Magic the Gathering, but focusing on some key new M19 core cards to fit in. In this episode we're going to be featuring Abzan Collected Company and Grixis Hollow One.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Some exciting decks.
Yeah, we got some cool decks.
Who's going to win it?
Well, we're going to find out shortly.
We're going to watch and find out. And while you are watching, don't forget that you have an opportunity to win an M19 booster box. All you need to do is comment down below and share the video, and you will be entered into the monthly raffle for an M19 box.
Yeah, so here we go, getting ready to begin the game with our favorite rock, paper, scissors. So here we've got Saralyn and Ryan are our two players today, and we've got some pretty cool modern decks happening. Our first deck that we're going to be featuring here is on the left is Saralyn's deck. It's a pretty standard Hollow One deck. If you're familiar with Hollow One, is this a card that you've played or seen played?
I'm familiar with Hollow One. A lot of fun.
Yeah.
Discard and draw shenanigans.
It plays the card Burning Inquiry, one of the more sort of absurdly strange cards possible in Magic. Sure. Both players draw 3 cards and then discard 3 cards at random.
All
so
for 1 red mana.
Yeah,
that is a potent card.
If you ever enjoyed casting Hymn to Turk on your opponent, imagine how much fun it is to also cast it on yourself.
So Saralyn will have the go there with the
yeah. It looks like she likes
scissors, lasers.
Correct, yes, and it looks like she likes her hand. Now on the right we've got Ryan. He's playing a slightly different sort of variety of combo, where he's playing a deck that goes for an infinite mana combo.
Okay, how are we going to do that?
Well, it's got Vizier of Remedies, which says your creatures can't get counters placed on them, -1/-1 counters. And then the second card that we have is Devoted Druid, which is a really old one that some people might remember. It's an elf that makes a mana, puts a -1/- counter on it. So what happens when you have these 2 cards in play? You have infinite mana. You have as much mana as you could possibly want, and this deck, tries to finish the game with either Walking Ballista or Ronus the Indomitable. So you basically you play modern cards to get you there, and then standard cards to finish the game.
Seems good. All right, so already life totals are changing pretty heavily there, cycling those street wraiths.
Street wraiths, yeah, because basically what you're trying to do with this deck is play Hollow One as soon as possible, and Street Wraith is really good at helping you do that. Here comes the aforementioned Burning Inquiry.
Okay.
This card is this card is so much fun. So both players are going to draw 3, and then they're going to just randomly select 3 cards. And then we get to see if Ryan, like, for example, discards all of his lands and can't play Magic, or...
This seems so risky.
Yeah.
We've already got 14-20 on the board, and it's turn 1.
Yes, this deck, Hollow One, is relatively similar, if you recall, a deck... okay, there's a bird, a Vizier, and a land, so that's probably hurts Ryan a little bit.
What did we lose over there?
Okay, well, it looks like Saralyn did pick up a copy of Hollow One, which is that's our payoff for doing all this crazy discarding.
Which every time you cycle or discard, you get
Basically, Hollow One costs 0 mana in this deck pretty often. Occasionally, it costs 1 mana if you have some hands, but in most of the time, on turn 1 or 2, it costs 0, and that's sort of your payoff for discarding.
Turn 1 4/4.
It's not bad. I prefer to have at least 2 on turn 1, but I'll accept 1. I'll take 1 in this spot. So it looks like Ryan, after having to discard, unfortunately, a Vizier and a land, he still did have a land in his hand, which is a good thing. So he's going to use that Windswept Heath and pick up something. Probably in this deck you end up getting Temple Garden most often. You do have some black cards, though, so I can see why you might grab an Overgrown Tomb, which is what he's done here.
Sure. So you said some black cards. So it's mostly going to be a green-white deck. What are you getting that black mana for?
So one of the cards in one of the other combos in this deck, which is a combo that a lot of people are familiar with, used to use Malira, and now they use Vizier of Remedies, involves Viscera Seer as a card that can sacrifice a creature, and that card needs black mana. So that card is an important card to one of the deck's many confusing combos. And with a Horizon Canopy in hand, Ryan said, you know what, I can afford to get a black producing land just in case I draw Viscera Seer. So Saralyn's got an interesting choice here. She has a Goblin Lore that she can play. And Goblin Lore is really strong in this deck. It's very similar to the Burning Inquiry, but it's only for you. That being said, she already has kind of a strong board presence, and I believe in her hand I'm looking at a copy of Lightning Bolt, which means that we're going to see 90s Magic at its finest, Bolt the Bird probably, which is, never really a bad play in Magic, to be honest.
get rid of the mana fixing.
Oh, okay, interesting. So she's going to actually pass the turn and let Ryan take his turn. I think in this particular instance, maybe actually a really smart play. A lot of the time you want to eliminate the Bird of Paradise, but here, given that Ryan's playing a combo deck with a lot of elements that are sort of irreplaceable, meaning like the bird, if it dies, he can be basically replaced by a land. But if the Vizier, bites the bullet, then it's going to be a much harder card for Ryan to replace.
For sure.
So her choice here was kind of just to let the bird live, which I think is fine given the matchup. Although it's very awkward that the card that Ryan followed up with was Kitchen Finks. That's going to really put a damper on these attacks.
Blocker.
Yeah, against Kitchen Finks in this deck specifically, that's where you really want Flame Blade Adept. I can say it. I can say it. Flame Blade Adept is a 1/2 mostly draft card that for some reason is amazing in Modern.
Great.
Why
is that?
Great in draft, great in Modern, not so good anywhere else.
Okay.
It's really good because it has Menace, which is a mechanic that you don't play with a lot in Constructed, but this deck really showcases its power because when you get like turn 1 Flame Blade Adept or like turn 1 and turn 2 multiple Adepts into all of these discard effects, you end up with getting quite a lot of Menace damage in, which puts your opponent in an unfortunate position of double blocking and losing everything, or, like you playing one removal spell and they're taking a ton of damage.
Speaking of blocking, is Ryan going to respond here? Yep.
Yeah, so he's going to block Hollow One with Kitchen Finks.
Okay, so
Kitchen Finks is going to come back.
Come back, and more life.
Correct. So basically this Bloodghast attack is just completely negated by the Finks. He takes 2 from Bloodghast, but he gains 2 back from the Finks. And now Saralyn kind of has some options. We'll see how she chooses to do this. It looks like she can cast pretty much any card in her hand. It looks like we're going to start out with a Goblin Lore, is that correct? Yeah, we're going to start with a Goblin Lore. The Goblin Lore is sort of like a personal Burning Inquiry, maybe even a little better because you actually go up a card. Burning Inquiry is just like draw 3, discard 3. Lore,
your opponent could get what they need, which is risky.
Lore is like you draw 4, you discard 3, so it's actually like card advantage, in a manner, or at least breaking even. Whereas the other one, you're down a card. Oh no!
Ooh, there were one of the hollow
yeah,
ones.
the hollow one gets discarded. But hey, maybe she drew another hollow one though. Oh, or not. Yeah, this is when this deck isn't at its best at times, when you get into these situations where you're like drawing the Bloodghast and discarding the hollow ones when you want to do the other way. You desperately want it to be the other way around. I think it's correct. Yeah, I like that play. She's going to cycle Street Wraith, which I think is a good idea because she needs to try to find something else. Just lands, it looks like.
Okay.
So kind of options here are to play Foothills, probably sacking just for a basic and maybe bolting something. Or just waiting, passing the turn, and then holding up that bolt to see if Ryan goes for a combo of some kind.
Okay, so we're on 4 mana.
But here's the thing about this particular combo that's different from others. Devoted Druid, if it has Summoning Sickness, it doesn't actually work. You can't just like slam Devoted Druid and Vizier. It's kind of like, if you remember back in the Splinter Twin days, it was like you couldn't play Pestermite and then a Splinter Twin on it and then win the game. You had to like wait because Pestermite had Summoning Sickness.
But I'm playing Modern. I don't want to wait.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, Devoted Druid, specifically combo, requires a little bit of patience. But much as we had seen from Tad in our previous match, here Ryan also has the card Collected Company in his deck, which is pretty nice in these small creature decks.
Okay, so you're thinking we keep the 4 mana up and do that?
I think so. This way, Ryan can kind of see what Saralyn's up to. He can, whatever her turn brings, whether it's like more creatures or if she has untapped mana, he can use whatever happens to inform how he wants to, what cards he wants to get from Collected Company. Assuming, of course, he hits like options, which
for sure.
Yeah, well, if you're me, you just definitely hit Noble Hierarch every time. So wow. I don't ever have options, but pretending that he actually hits multiple things, he'll have a choice to do it. Now I don't know. For some reason, I always tell these stories about how unlucky I am, but yeah, there's no worse feeling in the world than Collected Company for 1 Noble Hierarch.
What about
the nightmare?
What about all lands, all blanks?
All blanks is unfortunate as well, and like mathematically, both of those things don't happen that often. Okay, this is interesting. So Saralyn again, I think she's is that the 4th Street Wraith this game, right? So that's
she's
all
10
of
life.
the Street Wraiths.
That's a lot of cycling happening.
It is. Kind of trying to find something to do.
Do you risk that Goblin Lore? I mean, I feel like you have to, right?
Well, the problem is we're getting to a point in the game where, unfortunately, the Hollow One deck was really a little slow out of the gates here, and when it becomes slow out of the gates, like it is in this particular game, cards like Kitchen Finks are just a real like pain in the neck. Like Kitchen Finks being able to block like either fog the Hollow One or like hit one of these blood gas is just annoying. All right, so it looks like he's gonna have a choice here. He's gonna chump the Hollow One, but then before. Ooh. Okay, interesting.
Try and get some blockers here?
No, I think he already blocked the Hollow One, but then he's just going to look and see if he can get some kind of value here from one of these. Let's see.
Well, you got...
Yep, okay, more Kitchen Finks, so that's not annoying or anything. Okay, and a Duskwatch Recruiter.
And there were those Hierarchs there just for you.
Yeah. Well, he thankfully did not have to put a Noble Hierarch in play, which is a good sign for him. Duskwatch Recruiter is kind of a cool one. A lot of people might remember it from Standard, when it was an extremely annoying card in this Abzan Collected Company deck, which seemed to always draw your opponent into good cards. But here it's used a little differently. So we talked about the combo of this deck mostly needing Devoted Druid and then Vizier.
Sure.
So the question is, okay, well, once you have infinite mana, what do you do now? And the answer is Duskwatch Recruiter. That's what you do. Duskwatch Recruiter has an ability for 3 mana. You can tap it and look at the top 3 cards of your deck. Well, when you have infinite mana, you can look at your entire deck. So yes.
Really?
Correct. So you use your Duskwatch Recruiter infinitely. I mean, you could name it 20 times is enough, because whatever, probably 18 times is enough, but whatever. You say, I will use Duskwatch Recruiter ad infinitum, and then that eventually results in you having a Walking Ballista in your hand, and it results in your opponent taking, I don't know, 1 billion damage.
Checks out. Seems
yeah.
Good.
Okay, so we're getting to a board state here that's going to be slightly awkward.
Okay.
All right, there is the...
Combo's on board, but he doesn't have haste, so he can't do anything.
Right.
Oh, he's going to bolt the other kind of bird.
Yeah, let's see which one Saralyn chooses to bolt. There's merit to kind of either one. I mean, because Ryan can use the Duskwatch to find one side or the other. And there's about the same... I guess there's one fewer Vizier in the deck because one's already in the graveyard from Burning Inquiry. So maybe going to get the Vizier is the best choice because there's fewer Viziers available.
Looks like that's what we're doing.
Yeah, it looks like that was her choice, and I think that's probably a good play. I mean, because the Devoted Druid without a Vizier is kind of like a bad Llanowar
You
Elf.
might want to look at that hand, though.
Oh, yeah, well, but, you know, like...
no, it's still the right play to make, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, Saralyn does not have the access to hand chems as we do, so she has to just play the game based on what she sees on board, and I think, you know, blowing up the Vizier definitely was the correct play, at least from my perspective, just because there's fewer of them, and, you know, given that her deck plays quite a bit of removal, I'm okay with, you know, getting a Vizier out of the way there.
Ooh, I see a Gurmag Angler. I see options for...
Yeah. Plus, you know, the other thing that's annoying about Vizier too is that it gives future copies of Kitchen Finks, and it lets them like stay and play indefinitely because they can't get counters or whatever. It's like, ugh, it's annoying.
So do they like go to the yard, come back?
They just come back the same, yeah. They just come back and they just keep coming back forever if you have Vizier plus Kitchen Finks. So it's a pretty irritating combo.
All the more reason.
Yeah.
Right, so we're gonna double block.
It looks like the double block is happening, and so Hollow One is out of here.
Good.
This will take Ryan down past 10, which means that Bloodghasts are going to have haste from here on out, which occasionally actually becomes important in this deck.
I'm counting.
Looks like
everyone evened up at 8.
Yes, I think we have to tap slightly differently for that thing though, because I think that was there you go.
There we go.
So yeah, so it's a Grimmetic Angler, a giant zombie fish, because why not?
Delve out a bunch of cards.
Yeah, so you just delve a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter, and now you have a giant guy. It's amazing that Tarmogoyf costs something on the order of $100 or more, and Grimmetic Angler costs about 10 cents. And Grimmetic Angler beats Tarmogoyf in a lot of fights, which is kind of a funny thing. Alright, so let's see how this works out. So here comes the Goblin Lore. Obviously, the best thing for Saralyn at this time would be a removal spell of some type, perhaps Lightning Bolt. That would be ideal because that will protect her from future combos. So let's just see what came up here. Looks like a Burning Inquiry. I think you just cast it. I mean, there's not a lot of downside to it. Yeah. So, and this also could mess up, you know, Ryan's draws as well. You don't really play Burning Inquiry just to mess with your opponent, but sometimes it has the added benefit.
Pretty critical discard right here.
This is huge. We know from our advanced knowledge of hands that there are some copies of Vizier in Ryan's hand, and hopefully,
That's one of them.
Yeah, the Vizier's out of there. Collected Company's out of there, and also it's a Vizier hit the graveyard as well, so that's going to put a damper on that particular combo. It looks like...
We got a Phoenix in the yard now.
Yeah, Saralyn has a Phoenix, but it looks like she's tapped out. And I think I spy in Ryan's hand a copy of Vizier of Remedies, which means that we're going to see infinite mana, I believe, on the following turn here.
No.
Yeah, so... Alright, he's going to save a life because clearly that's very important when your opponent's tapped out, but it's still correct. Yeah, so we're going to watch him go through the motions here. You can pick up your whole deck, Ryan. You know that, right? Yeah. So they've actually changed the rule on this recently.
Okay.
You used to have to, if your opponent asked you previously, they said, okay, you'd have to ask them to create a shortcut and say, hey, can I pick up my whole deck instead of looking at each 3 cards with this? You used to have to do that, but they've recently changed the rules when it comes to shortcutting and when it comes to combos, and so now it's perfectly acceptable to pick up your entire deck, show your opponent a copy of Walking Ballista, and you can both move on.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, are you going with the Ronus kill? Oh, okay, fine.
So instead of the infinite damage Ballista, we have the infinite damage
Infinite damage Ronus, sure. Yeah, I mean, it was either way. It didn't particularly matter which one he went for there.
So that's going to be game 1 to Ryan.
Yes. It was the early Kitchen Finks was kind of tough. I think Saralyn's choice to not bolt Birds of Paradise is very close. The reason to not do it is because this deck is very combo-centric, so bolting a combo piece seems like a lot better. At the same time, that play did open up Ryan's ability to play Kitchen Finks on turn 2, which turned out to be kind of a speed bump for Hollow One and friends.
So, you're Saralyn. What do you do to catch up on game 2 and game 3?
Well, I believe the sideboard for this particular version of the deck has a lot of strong cards here. It has Grim Lavamancer, which is just especially on the play, just the bane of a green deck's existence. Because Grim Lavamancer, especially in a deck where you're discarding with Burning Inquiry, that card can like easily mow down 2 or 3 creatures in a game.
Absolutely. I saw some fatal pushes in there to get the combo pieces.
Correct.
Seems like a good play.
Yeah, and the other big sideboard card, exactly right, is a Fatal Push. Because Fatal Push, you don't necessarily want to play it, too much of it, in the main deck of this deck, just because it's not relevant in every matchup. But as we know from Standard, when you play, Fatal Push is just the premier 1-mana removal spell against any kind of small creature deck.
For sure, and Modern, where you're playing a lot of cheaper spells, like, no-brainer.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that keeps it from being a main deck card in this particular deck is just because Lightning Bolt is just a little better. When you're trying to clock your opponent, you're trying to put pressure on him as quickly as possible. You can't, like, Fatal Push your, let's say, scape shift opponent to kill them, but you can definitely bolt them for 3 and when they're at a low life total, and it can combine with some other stuff to deal a bunch of damage. But post board, we do have access to a little bit more removal, and like I said, I think a key card in this matchup is definitely Grim Lavamancer. I think that's a card where Saralyn will be looking for that in her opener. Not that you can always mulligan to Lavamancer, but it's definitely the card's value in your opening hand is extremely high.
Sounds good. So that's the Grixis sideboard. What do you do if you're Abzan here?
Well, one of the cards we're choosing to feature from M19 here in Ryan's deck is the new Ajani.
Okay.
And I believe it's what is the name of this guy?
Enemy of Tyrants?
Ajani. Yes, correct. Ajani, Enemy of Tyrants. So he does have access to that card. That card does a few different things that are kind of interesting here.
Adversary of Tyrants.
Adversary of Tyrants. It's okay. We know
we know what we're talking about.
We know he doesn't like Tyrants, so that's good enough for me. So Ajani, he does a couple things in here that are a little wonky, a little different from Standard. He can reset a Kitchen Finks, which is kind of cool.
That seems good.
So
both using the +1, get rid of the -1.
So that's annoying. And also he can recur combo pieces from the graveyard. So just in case, like, say a Vizier of Remedies decides to die in the face of a Fatal Push, he can just return it immediately to play. So that's a kind of a cool card. It does cost 4 though, and being on the draw in Modern with 4 mana cards sometimes is not the best strategy. So we'll have to see how Ryan chooses to play it, if he chooses to bring those in, and if he does, how effective they can be.
For sure. Do you have a favorite planeswalker?
Do I have a favorite planeswalker?
Yeah. I mean, we can talk mechanics, we can talk flavor. I'm not sure.
Man, I would just gonna go with Jace the Mind Sculptor, the most boring answer ever.
For sure.
Just because every time I've cast that card in my life, I feel great. It just makes me feel so good. I think Jace the Mind Sculptor, like the feeling of casting it and just like looking at it and looking at the board and realizing that any of its abilities is just like magical. It's just like a feeling that I love, you know.
Absolutely. No, I only bring it up because love of Johnny.
Oh yeah.
So I'm excited to see him come in.
All right. This Ajani is really strong, and we've seen it in Standard last week, and now we see it in Modern. All right, so it looks like also there's a really interesting card. Do you see that card all the way on the? Yeah.
What's that?
Mark of Asylum. Yeah. So Mark of Asylum is a really cool card. It's not a card you see all that often. It's usually used in a creature-based combo such as this.
Okay.
It basically says that you prevent all non-combat damage to your creatures.
Ooh.
Okay, here we go. All right, Faithless Looting. That's a good one. You know, not the most powerful of the draw spells in this deck, but the good news with it is you actually get to choose the cards you discard, which is usually a good thing. So it looks like Sarah's going to discard a Flamewake Phoenix, which enjoys being in the graveyard more than in play, so that works. And then her second discard, it looks like, is just going to unfortunately be a land.
Okay.
I mean, in a perfect world, you'd want to discard, say, like a Bloodghast there. But, you know, discarding a land is definitely better than having to discard a relevant spell.
So crack that fetch land and let's see what we're getting.
Yeah, it looks like we're just going to be getting our typical turn 1 mana creature, which when you play these Collected Company decks is always going to be extremely important. You know, I don't know if they do some kind of math on it, but I'm sure that the number of games you win with a turn 1 Bird of Paradise are significantly higher than the games where you don't. Alright, and so Sarah's got some options here. She does have a Flameblade Adept, card we mentioned earlier as being pretty aggressive and
Seems
you know,
good right now.
pretty difficult to deal with. At the same time, she also has Collective Brutality, which is a very powerful card. It can do something like, for example, kill this Bird of Paradise and then take maybe a Collected Company out of her opponent's hand. So, personally, if it were me, I think I would look at perhaps classing the Collective Brutality here, because then next turn you'd have the access to play the Adept as well as another Brutality if need be. At the same time, there's something to be said for just getting the Flameblade Adept into play attacking as soon as possible.
For sure.
Alright, it looks like we're lining up, okay, it does look like that she is going to go for the Brutality, discarding a land? Yeah. Discarding a land, and that will kill the bird, and then also, also take a look at his hand, and this way a Collected Company, or in this case, he has both, jeez.
Oh, jeez.
I think it's either Court of Calling or Collected Company.
You don't go for, well, I guess you're playing multiple outlets for your mana, so getting Ronus doesn't necessarily matter.
You can only get like a non-creature with that thing. Yeah. You can, so her options here, it's instant or sorcery, I believe. So her options are Collected Company or Court of Calling. Collected Company, I think, is a much scarier card than Court. Even though Court can get anything, it's quite expensive. So I like this play. I think this was a good play from Saralyn because, yeah, now we have Mark of Asylum, but like no creatures. And by the way, Mark of Asylum, completely useless against Fatal Push or Collective Brutality. It does not stop either of those cards because it only deals with damage. It does, however, stop Lightning Bolt from, you know, getting in the way. So it looks like Saralyn's going to go here for the Flameblade Adept. Then ideally next turn she will try to discard enough cards to make this Flameblade Adept kind of big, which would bring back Flamewake Phoenix.
Passing back, we're still at 18-17s looking like.
Yeah, this is typical of like a post-board game in this kind of matchup where both players have a little more interaction than they did in game one. You see that Saralyn, you know, has had, you know, multiple like removal spells, like access to those kind of effects, and Ryan has had Mark of Asylum, like not like a sideboard card that basically kind of bricks some of your opponent's interaction. Of course, you know, we know not the one that she happens to have, which is Collective Brutality. Also, a very smart play by Ryan to play Ronus specifically because he knows that Ronus cannot be destroyed by anything that Saralyn can have there. Except, I guess, a Dismember.
Yeah.
Okay. So, now we're going to see how many cards we can possibly discard to bring back a Flamewake Phoenix. I don't think we can get there. I think we can only get Flameblade to like a 3-power guy. Because we could play a Collective Brutality discarding 2 things, which would bring him to a 3. But that would not be quite enough to bring back the Phoenix. So, we're going to have to see what our best play here is. Yeah, this is a little bit close. I mean,
it's a hard choice. That's intense.
Yeah, I mean, you can cast the Brutality and take the card you already know about in there, which is the Court of Calling. At the same time, the court is not looking great with just a Ronus and 1 green land. So it's okay. Faithless Looting. This play I like quite a bit. So this will allow Saralyn to do a couple things. First of all, she gets to draw and look at some more cards. We know Lightning Bolt is pretty mediocre now that Mark of Asylum's hanging out, so that would be maybe a card we'd look to discard. But the other thing is we might be able to draw into, say, like a Street Wraith, which would allow us to hopefully get to Flame Wake Phoenix time. Yep. So she'll discard both bolts, which is kind of painful, but, you know, it's what happens sometimes.
Right now, so.
Yeah, with Mark of Asylum hanging out on the other side of the board, Lightning Bolt a lot less exciting than it would be. Okay, and it looks like, I mean, it's interesting because she could cast this other looting to try to find specifically Hollow One, because unfortunately, if she casts the looting and doesn't find Hollow One, then she will get to deal a lot of damage with Flameblade, but she will not have been able to return the Phoenix. I think I would lean on the side of just casting the looting, though, honestly, because if you do find 1 copy of Hollow One, it's good. If you find multiple copies of Hollow One,
there you
go. now we're talking. So, I think that there's definitely something to be said for maybe holding it, especially because you'll have an additional card and more information next turn, and potentially the ability to bring back Flamewake Phoenix. But I kind of like just firing it off and seeing what happens that way.
Going for it.
Looks like just a Goblin Lore and land, but you know, those would have been our next 2 draws anyway, and they would have been pretty mediocre. So yeah, we're just going to discard those, which I think is good. Now we're going to see kind of what happens. This is pretty interesting. Saralyn unfortunately unable to find a copy of Hollow One there, which would have really kept off that turn of multiple Faithless Looting. But, you know, it's not like Ryan has a lot going on either, though. He's basically got a Ronus and nothing. So he has 2 options. He has a Johnny. Here we go.
There he is.
And foil a Johnny.
Love it.
It's pretty sweet. Okay. So he's got Johnny, Adversary of the Tyrants, and now he has to decide what's their best play here. And he believes the best play would be to return Bird of Paradise to play. This puts Sarah in kind of an unenviable position of either having to sort of waste an attack on Johnny or ignore it and risk sort of losing to it later. It looks like her hand is, a Hollow One and a Collective Brutality, which unfortunately don't work that well together. So what's her best bet? Okay, flashback Faceless Looting. I like that. Because that will allow her to draw 2, discards some number of cards, and then at least be able to pay 1 for a Hollow One. Not the ultimate discount, but we'll take it.
Yeah, I get to play it this turn.
Yeah, I mean, right, it's like 80% off. You know, we'd all take a sale, 80%. It's not 100% off like we want it to be, but, you know, it's good enough. Then, you know, it'll also leave her with multiple removal spells in hand. So her options here are kind of twofold. It's either play the Hollow One for 1 or bolt the Johnny to his demise.
I think you get the Hollow One out when you can.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some benefits to playing the Hollow One. The disadvantage is that if Ronus ever becomes active, Hollow One is just not very good. But at the same time, like, not adding to your board, is that helping you? So, now keep in mind that Ronus, even though it is a 5/5, currently Ryan does not control a creature large enough to make that creature attack or block. So yeah, you're just ignoring it. Yeah, I like that. I love this play. It's just, you know what, a Johnny, I don't care. Yeah. Sorry, a Johnny. But, you know, you don't matter, and I will simply, you know, get my opponent's life total a little lower.
Playing at that Hollow One?
Yeah.
Back to Ryan.
Well, I think the mentality here is, you know what, if Ryan wants to leave back, like, lands to tap to make Ronus larger, you know, I think Saralyn's pretty okay with that. Because in the end, with having a menace creature in play, Ryan's kind of in a position where he has to be able to hoard, which we know is, again, both players know is part of his hand. He needs to be able to hoard for something but also be able to make the bonus block really. Or he can run some kind of like a double block with Bird of Paradise and something else, which, you know, while good, it's not necessarily game winning.
She's gonna pump out a Johnny, getting counters.
More to be able to block. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm just confirming, which is a really smart thing to do when you're playing a game and a card's, the way it works is a little weird. Just confirm with your opponent. She does exactly that, just to make sure, okay, Ronus needs a 4 or greater friend to be able to attack or block.
Do we go get said friend with core, or do we go do something else here?
Well, I think that a play that Ryan had access to there was to go get like a, I believe he could cord for a Kitchen Finks and then place the counter onto that, which would have opened up Ronus's ability to attack or block. But instead of doing that, he chose to kind of do it in a different way, which honestly, depending on Saralyn's hand, might actually be better. Because unless she can really pump up her menace creature, flame baited up pretty high, the Bird of Paradise being a 1/2, it creates kind of a little bit of a threat for that. Okay, it looks like just another bird and a pass.
So we're gonna upgrade.
So,
4 on this gunship.
yeah, so it looks like this will allow more than likely a trump block from a bird, followed by a Court of Calling for something. Court of Calling, one of the most difficult cards in Magic to play. Have you ever played with that card?
I didn't hear you.
So I know
give it
that
a
it's
activated.
green.
Yeah, you do. Which
Go for is an option cost. How does that? What does it end up actually doing?
Well, basically what Court of Calling does is it puts every creature in your deck in your hand at all times, which sounds great in theory and is kind of great, but can be very confusing at times as well, because you know you can get anything, and it just depends, okay, what's the best thing to get? And I personally at least have done so many chords where I know 100% what I want, I cast the chord, I pick up my deck, and then I get something totally different than what I had originally thought about.
Too many
It was not
choices.
bad.
Yeah, because you're like, you in your mind, you're like, this would be great, and then when you have your whole deck in your hand, you go,
So we're
actually,
getting
wait,
Phoenix back.
this other thing would
Getting
be
a
better.
bunch of Phoenix backs.
Yeah, so the Phoenixes are returning, which is
So-
always awkward for your opponent. This is one of the
Okay,
nice things about having a flying bird
At
of
the
paradise,
beginning,
though, right?
Yeah,
Step on
intercombat.
top of the Phoenix if need be.
One,
Okay, here comes the chord.
Wow, presumably like the Phoenix triggers are on the
Yeah,
stack.
in response to the Phoenixes coming in.
no, the combat on the stack.
Oh, okay. With the Phoenixes on the stack, we're going
What
to
you want?
chord for 3. Interesting. So let's see what happens there. What did you get? Again, it could be anything.
Yeah, for 3 mana. That's most of your deck.
Yeah, that's pretty much the whole deck here. Oh, I love this Reclamation Sage. That's pretty cool. So, right. So the way this works actually is that she will not have to tap her mana, because the way that Phoenix works is if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, Phoenix ability goes in the stack, and you actually pay the red mana as part of the ability of the Phoenix.
Yeah.
So since the 4 power creature is no longer around, the plus side is Saralyn has access to 2 more red mana.
Sure.
The bad news is I don't think she has much to do with that mana this turn. And Reclamation Sage is a perfectly serviceable blocker for this flame weighted deck.
I think we're gonna go through combat.
Okay.
And
Yeah, this is very awkward.
bulky Johnny.
Yeah, we're gonna have to bolt Johnny because unfortunately there's just like no other full target given that Mark of Asylum is in play.
For sure. And
So this-
Johnny being able to get counters onto the other creatures and
Correct.
make your whole board just
Yeah.
better seems kind of scary, really.
Yeah, it's a little scary. That was an excellent play by Ryan to go get the Reclamation Sage. Kind of puts him a little bit further ahead. And now he's able to actually have some choices between, does he want to just pump up the Sage to be 4 power and attack with 2 guys? Or being at 7, is he still like maybe a little wary of that Flame Blade attack?
So I also noticed a land out there, the Gaffney Township.
Yes, yeah, Gavin Township, what a fantastic card. Basically just turns your creatures into slightly larger creatures. Very kind of smartly doing it here while
And then this one.
while his opponent is tapped out, knowing that, well, not tapped out, but I mean, Saralyn has 1 card, and if that card were, say, like a Fatal Push, I'm pretty sure we would have seen it happen already. Okay, so this is kind of what happens when you draw your Hollow Ones in an awkward sequence. But I believe you have 1 more Faithless Looting in the graveyard to go ahead and exile, which should allow Hollow One to come down. Oh wow, so it looks like Saralyn's going to have her pick of sort of expensive, beefy creatures between Gurmag Angler and Hollow One. But unfortunately, because she doesn't have additional cards in hand, she won't have access, I don't think, to both of them on this turn. So it becomes a little challenging, like, which is better? Is it better to cast a Gurmag Angler and exile a lot of your graveyard? Or is it better to cast a Hollow One, seemingly, potentially, for 1 mana, or free if she chooses to, like, keep Faithless Looting a Hollow One. Although I guess, since she only has Swamp available, that's not going to be a play she can make.
So why would you choose Hollow One over Gurmag?
Well, if we had access to Faithless Looting, Hollow One would be free. But since we don't, I think the pick here is just to play the Gurmag Angler, get that big guy in play. You should be able to block almost anything and start attacking relatively soon. So we're just going to exile a bunch of cards from our graveyard, not named Flamewake Phoenix. And then Ryan is going to get to untap with, I believe, no cards in hand. Is that right? No cards. So he does not have a card, but he does have a Duskwatch, as well as 7 mana. So largely any card he can draw or hit with Duskwatch will become relevant.
Double check it.
Yeah, so I guess we're just attacking with a Flame Blade. And Ryan is maybe forced to double block here, which is awkward because Duskwatch Recruiter is going to bite the dust, which means that his next turn is a lot less exciting. But I think the double block is probably fine from his perspective. What he doesn't want to do, he's at 7, I believe, and he doesn't want to go down much further than that against the deck that plays cards like Lightning Bolt.
Just to make our flyers bigger here.
Yeah, I mean, just activating Gavany Township is never a bad play.
Sage is on you.
The Reclamation Sage is now moved up to a 4/3, which means that Ronus is ready to battle. Ronus is ready.
Okay.
Is that battery exhausted?
With that Gurmag Angler.
Oh yes, there was that Gurmag Angler that she cast last turn. That's right. So
Ryan is
board state. Yeah, he's got a lot of creatures, and his options are basically attack with Ronus or attack with a lot of things. Being that he's at 7, I feel like attacking with too many creatures is maybe one of his only ways to lose here, to some sort of a flurry of fatal pushes or something of that nature.
Sure.
But keep in mind that since Saralyn does have now a 5-power creature, that she will have access to those Flamewake Phoenixes coming back from the graveyard. However, what do you spy on the right side here? How big are these Birds of Paradise at this point?
That's pretty big. I'm counting.
These birds are
3 counter, 2 counter.
Yeah.
Jeez.
We have 5 power worth of Bird of Paradise, which does not.
That's a little outside of the norm.
Which is not. Yeah, that is not something that's gonna be a real nice story for Flamewake Phoenix, which must attack into a larger bird, Bird of Paradise in this case. So Ronus comes in, smacks in for 8, which is good because that's exactly a 2-turn clock, which is going to pretty much put her in an awkward spot here, where she's going to, it looks like probably just cast a Flameblade Adept as a blocker for Ronus, maybe, and then return. It's awkward because returning the Phoenixes doesn't actually get you anywhere, does it?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it doesn't actually work.
You get to swing into the birds.
I mean, yeah, it doesn't really do anything. I guess all it does is it lets you bluff a fatal push of something, but I mean that doesn't matter. So yeah, it's just a tough situation for her. Where the best bet, I guess, is to just cast maybe cycle a Hollow One. Ugh, that's not a very good feeling when you're actually just cycling the Hollow One. It's always okay. Well, we see a little bit of a stronger play there. So we have that Faithless Looting out of the graveyard. That's kind of a good sign. And then that will discard a couple things.
Burning Inquiry, try and get the Hollow One out.
I mean, maybe it's really tough because
it seems really risky.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan has access to a lot of mana, and Ronus's pump ability does give trample. So even though Ronus himself doesn't have trample, the the ability to grant trample to one of these other creatures is gonna be really, really tough. Okay, there goes the Hollow One. And and past the turn, we're going to see another activation of Gavany Township. And really, when your opponent gets to activate Gavany Township 3 to 4 times in a game, those are not winnable games. Yeah. Those are not winnable games, unfortunately for most decks. Because when your Bird of Paradise is larger than most Tarmogoyfs, that's not a good sign for your opponent.
4-power Birds of Paradise.
Yeah, so these birds, it looks like, yes, these birds are just lethal on their own, I think, here. So. Okay, we can attack with everything for style points, but yeah, the birds by themselves would get it done. Oh yeah, so
blocks.
blocks. But then, I mean, we just activate this Gavany Township. We get some enormous Birds of Paradise.
Super dead.
Yeah, but,
That'll do
you
it.
know, oh well, that does happen sometimes.
That's the match.
You know, it was cool to see a Johnny doing his thing in Modern.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, our superstar of this match, also an M19, Reclamation Sage.
True. You know what? Yeah, that really was the game changer.
Yeah.
There was the clutch.
It was.
Get the cord, get the sage, get your.
Yeah, it was
Oh.
like killing 3 creatures in one because it got rid of the 4-power creature that was going to bring back the Phoenixes. So it was like 2 flyers and a 4/4, and yeah, Reclamation Sage got rid of all of them.
Tremendous.
Yep, it's just a strong card, and I'm excited that we have access to it in Standard because it's a nice sideboard card because not only is it like a disenchant, but it can attack, which most of your sideboard cards generally cannot. So I do like the inclusion of that card in M19, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do with it in Standard.
All right, well, that about does it here. Congratulations to Ryan with
Yep.
Abzan Zoo. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure to subscribe if you want to catch all the episodes coming out on Monday as we play more Magic the Gathering. This has been Knights at the Game Table. Thank you so much for watching.